Good morning, Monday. This is my second good morning here for you. The first was, of course, 7 o'clock, and my second is, of course, for those of you who probably missed me at 7. So let's get together and get ready for the breakfast lounge for today on the 16th day of September. These are flying by real quick because we're already in the middle of September. Everything is going by real quick.
Very fast.
Yeah.
Very fast.
Is that shocking?
I saw a meme on Facebook that said August went quick, but September's doing 75 in the 35 mile zone.
Oh, what?
It said September's doing 75 miles per hour in the 35 miles per hour zone. I'm like,
oh
yeah,
my
that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Wow. Yay. How you doing this morning?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
That voice, of course, is the founding member, or should I say the founder of the PFP party that was actually founded back in 2019.
Yes.
Party for Progress. Actually, it's a youth-oriented party. And so to speak, and getting older. It was just your birthday too.
Yes, it was.
Okay. In the recently snapped elections, of course, on August 19, they managed to hold on to their 2 seats in Parliament, and of course also with a ministerial post as Minister Patrice Gumbs is currently the Minister of Romi, and he will continue. And that post, according to the party, and you now, soon to be former MP, will become, let's say, she said all her taxes are paid, so everything is in order there. So soon to be the Minister of ECYS, Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport. Let me say good morning to MP Melissa Gumbs.
Good morning. Morning, Grace. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, nice to be back.
Yeah.
Had to catch a rest after. I can imagine you had to catch a rest also following the snap election campaign.
I did.
Yeah.
When you reached out to me last week, I said, no, boy.
Yeah.
I speak, boy. I gotta take a break.
Yeah.
I gotta take a break.
Understood. Yeah. Understandable. No, but I've been good. It's trying to gather everything for the screening process, and now just actually on my way to Parliament today after this for what they call the credentials meeting. So we have to approve the credentials of the incoming members of Parliament who are going to be sworn in on Friday. So we're going to handle that meeting today at 10 a.m. And we have quite a busy week ahead of us as well in Parliament. So it's still the work continues. There's been no rest for the weary following the elections. So we're working on it.
You look at let's look back at the results of this election, and then you look at what the results were in January, and then you basically the Prime Minister calls for a snap election. Nothing much changed.
No, nothing really changed.
Nothing really changed.
And I think now after the election results, I heard a lot of talk of reflection and reconsideration, regrouping, and everything from other candidates on other parties. So I think that's something that I myself talked about here, where I said, there's been no self-reflection done essentially, because then you had the fall of government and all of that was just conspired and contrived, and here we are. It's basically the same. So we closed off the parliamentary year last week, and we're closing off the parliamentary term this Thursday, which is funny. And I have to check. I have to ask my dad if this has been the shortest parliamentary term that we've seen, because of course the term started February, and now the term is being closed off on Thursday. So I got to check with my dad if maybe this, in the history of us, being in such a system, if it is the shortest term that we've had so far.
Wow.
Yeah, because that's a little under like a 9-month term, basically. Yeah.
Because when you look at it, the previous government, you also had basically just for 17 days in government.
Yeah. officially.
Yeah.
Yeah, that government had 17 days and then has been demissionaire since. So yeah,
You look at what's happening in the neighboring islands, of course, also where government, Curacao was first to actually throw down their government
Yeah.
and actually sought, I think they got uh, help from, should say, help to keep their government together
Together,
somewhat
yes.
from the PNP.
Yeah,
And then look what happened, just recently happened last week in Aruba.
yeah, yeah, and
We don't want to be seen as a trendsetter.
no, of course not. But I think with Arubas, I said, come on, guys, all three islands in this part of the kingdom cannot be in Bacchanal at the same time. It's crazy,
Impossible.
but no, it's interesting, and I think I do believe that you're seeing a sort of wave against the established legacy parties, so to speak. I think in Aruba there was a time no one would have dared type of disrespect the sitting government, the sitting parties, and it's interesting to see how their own election is going to turn out. With all of that considered and how things have been moving so far. So it can be good and it can be bad all at the same time. And I think if we continue to see this trend of new faces, new blood looking to do things wildly differently from what has been the establishment, I think that it's working out to be good.
The PFP party is still relatively a new party.
Yeah, with 3 elections under our belt, it's exhausting.
Yeah. How challenging has it been for you as a leader of the party to keep everything in check, keep basically all the candidates on the same wavelength? The norms and the thoughts and everything.
Yeah, I think it's been tough. I think we've managed to keep the majority of the candidates on the same wavelength. I think the majority move as a unit, as one, and it's something that we've been building on since 2019, of course, when we first launched. And that first election leading up to January 2020, it was a challenge, but it was also that was like the core team that kind of came in like, okay, we're going to do this. We didn't know what to expect overall from being in parliament. I think I knew kind of what to expect, but not the full thing, and then you get to you're like, wow, it is actually worse than we thought than it was. And now 3 elections passed, it's just very tiring. And what I've realized is that the priority on candidates' mental health definitely needs to be improved and increased. For us, we always try to do that. From the first election, I told everyone, manage your expectations, take your time when you need it. Leading up to January 2024's election, we actually had a session, with a counselor, just to kind of help everyone work out, feelings that they may have had about the campaign up to date. This time around, we didn't get to do that because it was a snap election, it was very fast. But yeah, that's definitely something that I think we're gonna put a lot more effort and consideration into, because it is a drain. Mentally, it is physically and mentally, it is a drain on the body and the soul, basically.
Yeah, you actually, I believe, was for this election in particular, you were like totally against putting up billboards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you look at it, eventually you had to take them back down because of the storm.
Basically. Yeah, no, we were. I mean, it's a snap election, you're in the middle of hurricane season. And you never know what to expect. I mean, there was a point in time 2 weeks ago, the Atlantic had looked like a Christmas tree, basically. So for me, I just wanted to kind of, we wanted to kind of avoid that. But ultimately, the culture here is still, at least put up 1 or 2 here and there. So we kept it strictly to like the team posters. I allowed a few candidates, if they wanted at their own cost, put up, their own individual posters. Of course, not too much within, the acceptable range. And then again, as you said, everyone had to take everything down anyway. So they weren't even up for the full campaign time. But that's okay. And I think that's part of our political culture that has to change, that has to shift. You even had that whole debacle on public meetings, yes, no, maybe so, which, we do not do rallies for a reason. I think the public is over it. And even if I look at the crowd shots from the rallies, it's usually candidate family members in the crowd. I mean, if you want to do that, you can do it at your house, have a barbecue, and just talk to them there. But I think, we definitely have some elements of our political culture that need to shift.
Yeah.
And we don't have to go far for examples. The collectivité is right there. Their campaign style is very different. No billboards at all and everything. So, maybe it has to come to that point.
Still get elected.
Yeah, and candidates somehow they still get elected.
Social media.
Yeah, somehow. And also to the discussion on the presence at polling stations, I was very happy to see that it was a calmer election than it was January, because January was just nuts everywhere. Certain big polling stations were basically like a fete. And that's also something that does not happen in any other Caribbean island, to be honest. I checked with friends, because we like to model certain things after what they have done. And so I say, okay, let's look at everything. And indeed, when I spoke to some friends, they were like, what do you mean you guys wear your shirts and have posters up at polling stations? That's considered campaigning, and that's illegal in our process. So, different things to think of that also count as electoral reform that hopefully this new parliament can put some bite into.
You see that happening, because that's basically the talk right now from the chair lady of parliament, that the first thing that they want to talk about is political reform.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been some time now. Parliament had a terms of reference go out so that we could receive bids from a law firm to help with legislation, research, etc., into what can we tangibly and legally do for electoral reform. So that will also include looking at a screening law, and who knows, maybe it has to come to a point where we really have to put the not the strain, but the responsibility on parties to screen who they put on a list to begin with. It might be that you have to consider doing away with the lynch law, which is something that has been talked about quite often in the last 2-3 elections or so. So yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done. It doesn't all start and end with changing the Constitution, taking away Article 59, Article 33. It just, because at the end of the day, democracy really is about the personalities operating in it. Any system is only as good as the people that are working in it. So
when you mentioned the screening law, doing away with basically introducing a screening law, you're talking also about candidates prior to putting them on a political list?
Yeah, so the screening law that we're talking about specifically is for minister candidates.
Ministers. Okay,
yeah, to avoid this kind of vague kind of, is it, isn't it, and allowing then, the subjective opinions of others to kind of influence your formation process. So that is for that. But ultimately, I think whatever can be done legally, because that's also part of it, democracy is for the people, by the people. So you have to kind of see, well, can you actually interfere in who parties put on a slate? So that's why I said, it's really up to the parties to do that. And we've tried to screen as best as possible with what we can, having interviews. It's a whole process, to kind of get to where you're on the list and you're welcomed in. So yeah, maybe that has to be boosted on our end, or other parties have to introduce something like that. But I don't know if that's something that you can technically, legislate, so to speak. Yeah.
All right. Former Minister Plenipotentiary Minister Patrice Gumbs has been put in the position as Minister of Vromi.
Yes.
And from what I understood is that he actually will be holding on. Now, correct me if I'm here.
Yeah.
He will maintain that position.
Yes. Yeah. He will, for sure, because continuity as well in government is important. It doesn't just mean, stability means continuity. And I think as someone also who's come from private sector, where in a year and a half, I've had 12 different managers, I think that the feedback from the ministry itself, where things are starting to kind of normalize and things are starting to kind of streamline, you don't want to yank somebody out of that managerial role and put somebody else in. And I think that that's, something that we've talked about quite often. In fact, there was even a point in time where we said, to make sure that you have ministries that are functioning 100%, apolitical as much as possible. There was a time where we even considered as a party that we would just put forward what they call VAC ministers, so like a business cabinet, so persons absolutely not even related to the party, who are well versed in the subject matter and can go in there with a strong cabinet and actually, make things work and make things shake. Ultimately, we deviated from that a bit, but not saying that that's not something that we would consider if there was ever a time where we got a ministry where we did not necessarily have someone internally that we felt could be a good match.
As the highest vote getter of the party MP, the Weaver, actually, was she at any time considered for that position?
No, because like I said, it's about the continuity of what is happening in the ministry. And to be honest, votes, we've always been a party that says votes entitle you to one thing, and that's a seat in parliament. That's really what it is.
Okay.
We've never I've never bought into that. I think that that has actually caused a lot of dangerous behavior in our political culture over the last couple of decades, especially since the introduction of the lynch law, where persons, kind of get this individual, it's me kind of thing. But that's not how we have operated. It's not how we set forward to operate ourselves. And ultimately, the other role that was offered to MP Weaver was ECYS, of course, which is the second ministry that we now have: Education, Culture, Youth, and Sports. And I offered it because at the end of the day, I think that there are two ministries in my opinion. You really need someone that knows the subject matter. That's finance and justice. I think most other areas, a lot of people think, well, you have to be a teacher to be Minister of Education. I don't necessarily agree. I think that many of the ministries do well if you have a minister that is a good manager, that can build cohesion and can build consensus amongst the ministry with a strong cabinet. And the cabinet for sure should have knowledge of the subject matter and be able to, push those things forward. But ultimately, if you have a good manager in that role, you can actually do great things, I think. And that's really where our focus has always been. If you look at Patrice, it's been managing from putting in place those things that can help normalize the ministry, while supported, of course, by a strong cabinet that has knowledge of the departments, that has knowledge of the legal aspects behind the Ministry of Rami, from an infrastructure perspective, environmental perspective, etc. And then, of course, relying on your policy advisors that you have, who have that expert knowledge, I would say, to then kind of push what you'd like to see your vision for the ministry to push it forward.
Right.
Yeah.
When you talk of support, one of the people who actually in his cabinet, I believe, is also a former member of parliament of the PFP party. That's Rayon Peters.
Yes.
So he will be now shifted once you move up.
All goes well, yes. He will be coming into parliament again.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, let's talk about ECYS.
Yeah.
You actually decided, since MP the Weaver decided, no, she doesn't want the post, so you're going to put yourself in that position right now.
Yes.
Education. Let's talk about education.
Yeah, it's education. I mean, it's education, culture, youth, and sport. And there is a lot that needs to be done. I read the article that came out from DCOM from Minister Lewis, acting Minister of Education, Minister Lewis, regarding the assessments that have been made, the performance assessments. Public education, I think, has been neglected over the last even more than 4 years, to be honest, because there's been it's been a portfolio that's been knocking around one particular party for some time. And I think that, there needs to be immediate attention put on some of the issues that are facing public education. I myself am hoping to get a hold of these reports in advance to be able to at least peruse them, identify, the real critical issues, and then, of course, all going well, to be able to address them within the first couple of months, because I do think that is needed. I think a lot of things in education have lacked persons with the political will to make very tough decisions, because that's also what the bottom line, what it really boils down to. Many of the things that could have been done have not been done, either because persons did not want to ruffle feathers, didn't want to step on long toes and such. And I think that there's a professional way to make even difficult decisions. And that's something that I'm accustomed to, having been a manager before, from a private sector perspective. It's really just about finding ways that you can move forward in the best interest of, ultimately, the clients of education, which are the students.
What is the top of your agenda on your agenda, though, where education is concerned?
The report that I mentioned, that report from public education, that I think would be the first thing to be paid attention to. Following that, though, the special needs education policy was introduced very late in the last term. That's something that I definitely need to want to put attention to, not necessarily because there needs to be one special needs school, but because special needs education needs to be a priority for all schools. Because if you build a school tomorrow, it's full. And then what? There are still those who have not been able to get into that school, who are in the general population of our students. And those schools need to also receive support to be able to improve their handling then of kids that require special needs. And you have, of course, you look at autism, it is a spectrum. Some will be very severe. Those students definitely should have that special care that a school specifically built for them, with teachers that are specifically trained for them, will be able to handle. But then you have those on the minor end of the spectrum where they could exist in a regular, school, a regular public school, or one of the regular subsidized schools. But the reality is teachers are not prepared for that. I've heard horror stories of parents telling me that their children goes to XYZ school and they're just kind of put out of the classroom because they don't know how to deal with my son, and he's just allowed to just roam the school grounds or run around. And it's about having support for them to have sensory rooms where kids who have sensory issues, whether it's auditory or visual, can just go in, put on a blindfold, put on some headphones, and just cool out, because that's necessary. And if I think back to my own time at school, which was quite a long time ago, I can recognize that there were kids that I went to school with that needed that, that just needed somebody to say, okay, this is not a bad kid. This is just a kid that is having some tough times, difficulty with either the subject matter or with just everything that's happening, all the sounds, all the colors, all the noise, and maybe they just need a place to cool off, and then they can come back and be right as rain for the lesson to continue.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more on another subject here, which is besides education. Okay. Have you had any talks with the current minister, interim minister?
Not as yet, but it is on my schedule to have a chat with him, and also the transition between his cabinet and who's coming in with mine. So that's essentially that for me. Transition, that discussion has to happen regardless. So, and I have a pretty decent relationship with him. So, we all come from that French Quarter route. So I think it should be fine to meet with him and to just discuss. Like I said, I would love to get a hold of that particular report that he mentioned in his press release early, because I think the tone of the press release was very worrying and concerning. So there's a lot that needs to be paid attention to. And transition, the strength of the transition is key in any handover, whether it's government or whether it's in a public sector or in private sector. So that's definitely a conversation I want to have.
When you talk about strong support team, are you looking to basically revamp the current ministry in a sense of anyone in particular, picking someone, or probably one or two persons from within your party to join you in this ministry?
Yes, one or two persons, and also one or two persons from within the ministry itself that have the knowledge. Of course, being careful not to take capacity from any critical departments and such, and make sure that there is someone there that can fulfill the task, even if you do take someone out, because that's also part of the balancing act that we're kind of playing. So I'm looking forward to continuing that process, and as it gets closer to the date, finalizing what would essentially be my cabinet.
Do we have a shortage of educators on the island currently?
There's a global shortage of teachers. That's the reality. There's a global shortage of teachers. Whether it's here, even in the Netherlands, there's a shortage. And this is something that, it's easy to say you want to encourage persons to go into that field. But I think a lot of times persons feel like it's a thankless field right now. Teachers are not as revered as they used to be, I think, when I was a kid. And I've heard some horror stories from some of them. But again, I think it's just finding ways to address any behavioral issues or any challenges that they face in a structural manner that everyone, including teachers and the students, to my opinion, the most important factors in the education system, that they are all protected and operating in a safe space.
Do you believe, MP, that enough is being done? Because when we talk about education, people have a tendency of just thinking about the private sector or the public schools. But what about the University of St. Martin?
Yes. Actually, this week we have the continuation of the meeting on the higher education ordinance. So we've been having meetings with USM, the previous Minister of Education, and the current acting minister on USM's concerns in that law and what has been taken up in it, to be able to have them recognized so that they can actually seek further accreditation and offer different degree programs as well. So USM, I think, can be a great asset to our education system, and also as a research base, so to speak. I've gone to some of the sessions that they've had where it is, definitely focused on research that contributes to nation building. I've enjoyed all those sessions. They've been working with Curaçao's think tank, actually, for those sessions. So that's something I definitely want to see continue. and they do need that support, of course, with the knowledge of whatever budgetary constraints exist, because there are budgetary constraints regardless, coming from government itself. But if you would recognize them and you would allow them to kind of expand, the research portion can also contribute funds to the university that are much needed. So you have to be willing to let them spread their wings like that.
Yeah, because they somehow felt like they were basically excluded from a lot of, whenever we spoke about education, we speak of education, we're hardly hear anything about the University of St. Martin, an institution that has so much to offer.
Yeah.
But still can also
do
more.
Yes.
Do more.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Because, even you think about even teaching, you can start with a teaching program, but there's specializations, etc. Again, we talk about special needs education that you also want to be able to offer locally. And if not locally, then USM has built great partnerships with the university in the Virgin Islands and such. So the possibility exists to bridge any gaps that they may have. But for that to happen, they need to be put in a strong position where that higher education ordinance is implemented and they are then recognized and they can go forward with that recognition in hand.
All right, let's talk culture. That's another part of your portfolio.
I would like to see culture. I think there needs to be a lot more support for that, most definitely. Of course, we have former MP Solange Lumina Duncan in the party who's very passionate about our culture and our heritage. There's been a lot of talk about starting work on a local history and heritage curriculum for the schools, tying all of that in together, of course. And to provide that additional support to kind of have a streamlined calendar of events where, everybody knows what's happening and that we can actually put, effort into having these events pre-planned, even to where you could run them with your eyes closed. And I think for me, that would be the best, because a lot of times we see, even at Parliament, you may get an invitation late and such. And I've heard that the stress that the staff in the culture department are under, where it's like you don't know if something's going to be able to happen until it happens. And I think also trying to give them that capacity support to, if it's a funding issue, there are opportunities that we ourselves have been told as members of Parliament when we travel to IPCO. There's opportunities for these types of initiatives that can come from whether it's the EU or whether it's other entities in the region or elsewhere. So also trying to find ways to bridge any type of budgetary gaps we may have with pushing forward for that kind of assistance.
What about the center now for arts and culture? Basically, we are still, we have the cultural center here, but over the years, we've heard from so many political candidates and parties, oh yes, we need a bigger center. And when you look, for example, in Curacao and Aruba, you talk about cultural center. You're talking about one hell of a center.
And it's funny, I said this once in a committee of RAMI meeting in Parliament, that it was behind closed doors, but I've also talked about it publicly. We constantly hear this scrabble of, the long lease land needs to be easier for locals to get land, etc. And I 100% agree that, housing is also a crisis that we face. But we're an island of 16 square miles, and, for the Dutch side, and you have to kind of balance the urge to give individuals long lease land, or if you want to allocate long lease land towards these types of initiatives. And I said it in that meeting. Since 20 years ago, I've been hearing about the Performing Arts Center, etc. If you want things like that built, you need to find a space for them. So I think, moving forward, it would be something that I would definitely want to sit with the Minister of RAMI on and identify, what is there left, and is it possible at all to allocate a piece or a portion to, the development of a performing arts and cultural center that can be used, whether it's by the culture department or by organizations, etc. Even in the dance theaters and such, that they can put on these productions in grand style. But that, of course, takes planning, and it takes a commitment to say, well, we're not going to divvy up these particular parcels to whomever we may want to, but we're going to earmark it for this particular project.
Right.
So that's something that has to be discussed. And hopefully it is something that can be identified in this term that we can move forward with.
And also inviting extending invitations to other cultural organizations from different Caribbean islands to perform here also.
Yes,
Yeah.
most definitely.
Yeah. All right. Now, youth and sport. Let's
Yes.
touch on that.
Youth and sports. So the sports to me, I you know, I'm sure my cousin Omar is listening, and so is Marvio, but it's critical that we get our sports facilities up to par. And I know that Mr. Hoslinga at the NSI is already working on that. He's doing a great job so far. That's YISC, you know, working on restoring Rao Village, etc. But there are, you know, those facilities that I think, if we talk about, you know, something brand new, I think the sports auditorium. I've asked many questions about this to the previous minister about, you know, what is the plan for that, because the yeah if you've ever ran on that court, you're risking injury. There are
Mhm.
spaces where when you're playing ball you have to avoid because you might go through the floor, and that's just, you know, it's poor maintenance. It really needed to be shut down, I think, overhauled entirely. So we need to see if that is a possibility, if that is in the planning, because that could also be part of the planning that that NSI has along with sports department and the ministry. So it's just to kind of do an assessment to see where that's at and how, you know, it can be supported from the ministry's side to make sure that that is done. In terms of streamlining the access to sports, I would love to see it go back to when I was in school, where you had schools that were playing against each other in football, soccer. You know, you had that district level of basketball, that playing in between, which SEBA, you know, Marvin has worked very hard, tirelessly over the last couple of years to revive SEBA and supporting programs that are aiming to develop disciplined athletes and then get them off to a school in the US, maybe where they have a shot at a scholarship, you know, that they can go into collegiate level, whether it's D1 or another conference. You know, so I think that is definitely going to be part of my focus with how sports can develop on the island. It needs to be something structured. It cannot just be that Johnny Come Lately starts an organization and decides that this is what they're going to do. I also would love to see the streamlining of from a federation level down to an association level, where you have to be a member of the federation, because that is how you build sports properly. That's how you develop sports programs structurally, so that you know who your kids are going to be by. There's proper training for coaches, there's proper training for referees if you need them, umpires if you need them, etc. All of that is part of building a sports ecosystem that produces athletes that, you know, we can one day see on a screen and say that person is from Kobe or from wherever. You see it now with Casey Carty. That, I think, how cricket has developed here is a perfect example of how sport, when it is properly structured and it is a systematic growth, that you can see what our young athletes can accomplish.
Right. The sports auditorium, which is so frequently used for international tournaments, but how do you have an overall view, not basically view, but an idea as to what it will actually take to totally, like you said earlier, shut it down and just have the whole thing?
I don't have that view as yet. That's something that I've thought about. I've talked about it with Marvio. I've talked about it with Mr. Omar Bobetui from Performance Sports Academy, other coaches from the district basketball teams as well, you know, and as well netball, you know, because they also use it for their tournaments and for futsal, all of that. So it's really about trying to figure out, like, what would it take. Of course, there's a financial impact on that, and that is something that I would love to be able to assess when working in the ministry, to see, you know, how could we maybe through public-private partnership get something going for in there. Because I'll be honest with you, when I look at sports fields that have company ads on them on the wall or whatever. In the US, you may know, if a school has ads running from Coca-Cola, like my campus was a Coca-Cola campus. So there is a contribution annually to sports programs to make sure that, you know, the baseball team has uniforms that they need, bats, gloves, etc. Sponsorship, major sponsorship, you know, and it's structured sponsorship. That's the thing. Not that you give money today and then for 5 years it's like, you know, whatever. So it really is about, exactly. It is about saying, well, no, like, you know, we're signing a 5-year sponsorship agreement with PJD too, and this is how it's going to go every year. This is what you're going to contribute. And then you have, you know, organization in place that tracks that and make sure that the money goes into what it has to go into, whether it's maintenance, equipment, etc.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when you look at it, it's really, really outdated. The seating, of course, is something.
Every time I go there, I'm like doing a little dance in the bench because my back is like, what are you doing? You're 40.
The seating is outdated.
Yes.
The flooring needs to be revamped, and of course,
The heat.
Yeah, and that's the next thing that
Yeah.
people don't go to sports centers anymore and have to sit there and then just be
Sweating, yeah.
sweating. They're all air conditioned.
And the heat for me is like, it's not the heat of when I was a kid, Back then it was hot, but now it's just it's flaming.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I'm like, how did we ever have I don't know if I'm aging myself a lot, but that like a Disney on Ice. Remember we had an ice skating rink in there?
I remember.
And I think about it, I'm like, how did the ice not just melt?
No, because they had these special machines.
Yeah, keeping it going.
Keeping it
frosty.
The ice every day was quite a pricey
endeavor, for sure.
But it also kept the people inside cool. So
and I remember
it can't be done.
Exactly, and I even remember performing in there.
Take me way back with that.
I'll take you even further. But I remember performing in there with the Motions Dance Company. Yes, I did do ballet.
Wow.
I was in a Nutcracker. And then being in there, you're hot, and of course makeup on, hair pulled back, gel all over, and you're just like, I'm just a child, like what is happening? So I think definitely that has to be looked at to revamp that. But like I said, I know that NSI is working on the existing sports facilities, Rao Village especially. And it's really about the structural funding and management to be able to support them. And sports is a wonderful area where public and private partnership can occur, of course, in a way that is respectful to the athletes, to the teams, and to the facilities and the country as a whole. So that's what I'm looking forward to investigating.
The spending screening of you and the other ministers takes about 6 to 8 weeks.
Yes, I think the deadline is sometime in mid-November. That's an absolute deadline. But I think everyone else is kind of already there. So there's only 3 new persons that are being screened, which is myself, Mr. Richnel Bruch for VSA, and Ms. Natalie Tackling for Justice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
For Justice?
Yeah.
I was very happy with that selection. I think, I think Ms. Tackling has the knowledge of that legal field that is necessary. I know that she's also in the previous administration done some sort of work as well for that on pieces of legislation that are critical to the ministry. So I think that overall helicopter view is definitely going to be a help for her. And like I said, when you're looking at justice and finance, knowledge of the subject matter is critical. So I think that is definitely a positive step in the right direction. And I commend actually Mr. Myers and the SAM for doing, this is what you call a VAC minister. It's a business minister that is put there. There's no affiliation to the party, but they are put there for a job and to execute the vision for that ministry. And I think that that's a very mature selection that was made.
Right. When you look at the overall ministerial, basically the candidate ministers right now, and you look at that, what is your take on it though? Because when you talk about positioning a minister in a certain field or ministry, then that he or she should have some kind of knowledge of what the ministry actually is expecting from them.
Yeah.
You look at Natalie Tackling, comes out, she's actually a lawyer by profession, so she will fit in with a lot of people that came out of left field. I gotta congratulate Sam for that.
Yeah.
I came totally out of left field because there were so many speculations, and that's why you see so many speculations on social media.
Yeah.
You don't take up everything and run with it. And you as ECYS, you're Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, and then you have Bruch, who is a former member of Parliament, picks up the helm now from the current interim minister of VSA.
Yes.
You look at the overall picture when you talk again about taking up candidates or candidates actually postulating themselves or being selected or elected, not elected, they're selected for a particular ministry. How important is it for these ministers as yourself also to shine? Because you need a good backing. When I say a backing, your team actually has to be
for sure. Your team has to have your back. Yeah,
because
most definitely.
If you shine, it's because the people in the background are also shining.
No, your team is definitely important. To have that support, I think you're not going to get anything done. And it's going to be. I think it's a very interesting. It's going to be an interesting looking cabinet. I think of council ministers basically. And I do think that it's a relatively young one, with that that mental history of what has gone wrong and what we would like to see to be different and such. And really, the people that you put around you, the people in the back of you, are definitely critical to that success. But I think too, being able to kind of turn off the noise and just focus on the work is also important, because there's going to be a lot of noise. There has already been, they were quiet for a little while, but then the mouthpieces kind of flared up again afterwards, after the election. So I think it's just about being able to shut that out and focus on the work. And like I said, there's a lot of difficult decisions that need to be made, because persons have been kind of sold a cook and egg, a milk and honey reality. But as we have found out, especially from the Minister of Finance, it is really not all that. That's not the picture that is actually there. So it's really just about assessing something that I intend to do, the state of affairs, and then moving forward from there. And if there are tough decisions that need to be taken, then let's take them. And I've always said too, for myself in particular, because Ms. Tacklin has the benefit of being a VAC minister, so she's not a candidate or anything like that. But for those that are, it's important for us to be more in love with seeing things move forward and seeing progress than in love with the next vote. And I think that's something that I've stressed about as well from previous administrations, that has to be the focus. You cannot look at the decision that is right for the country and think, yeah, but it's going to cost me 100 votes. That's okay. You have to be okay with that, and keep faith in the fact that if you lose 100, you'll gain 200, because the persons that decision will benefit will see that you put yourself underneath their needs, and that you move forward with what was right for them.
A lot of candidates, basically, that is the idea of, I believe, the perception of when a candidate runs in a political party, he or she wants to gain the most votes, or gain enough votes that can actually acquire, put them in a position to acquire either ministerial or become a member of parliament. But again, like we said,
it's a parliamentary election.
It's a parliamentary election, and however the ball rolls, that it's in your favor. Again, like I said, some people feel that, hey, listen, I think that if I am the biggest vote getter here, and I was but twice, I should be entitled to a ministerial post. Let me say this: when you look, for example, at what's happening with the Now Party, the interminister of justice. He feels that he was not included in the talks, the formation talks. What is your take on that? Feel like he was snubbed.
I can understand that sentiment. Entirely. But I think too, there needs to also be attention and a reflection placed on, well, how was the working relationship and how was the working performance? Leading up to even the snap election, the guidelines, you had a calm decision that you then kind of failed to execute by issuing, guidelines that are in line with that calm decision. And then you saw that, you kind of allowed opposition to kind of run with it. And I'm not even saying that is something that had to be made as political as it was. At the end of the day, you cannot cry about safety in one meeting, and then the minute, a rally is, a calm decision comes out saying that a rally is not allowed, then it becomes, the false claim of voter suppression. That's not what voter suppression is. Voter suppression is taking people off a civil registry without, really prior informing them, and taking them off willy-nilly with no type of structure. That's voter suppression. Voter suppression is that people are not able to get voting cards on time, etc. Like, all of that is it. But a campaign event being forbidden because of safety concerns, that's not necessarily that. And I felt that was allowed to get too political, that whole discussion. And ultimately, those things matter. And I heard that the minister said in his press briefing that, yes, his attendance in COM was not great, but sitting down in meetings is not fruitful. The reality is, I agree, long meetings that have no purpose are definitely not fruitful. But COM is where decisions are made. Though that is where the work is done. For every ministry. For every ministry, council ministers meetings is where the work is done, where decisions are made. So if you're not showing up there, then that means that there are decisions that are going to be remaining pending for your ministries, actually, which would be then justice and ECYS, and that's the thing. So I think there's a lot of responsibility that was taken on. 2 ministries is definitely not easy. So I understand the frustration, but ultimately it's again a question of self-reflection and seeing, well, where could I maybe have done better that, this would not have ended up being what happened.
You think some of the candidates don't understand the power that they hold as a minister or as a member of parliament to be a parliamentarian?
I think sometimes I don't know. I don't think that they do. Parliament is definitely where it's at in terms of
Because
being able to keep
every time I want to be a minister, I want to be a
yeah,
minister.
yeah. It's
I'm not saying this about you, but
yeah,
that's the fact.
Believe me, I'm not pushing.
Yeah.
But I think that that again is part of this individualistic culture that we've bred here on the island. That's part of it's about me kind of attitude, because ultimately it is, like I said, a parliamentary election. You could be with a party that, like we initially wanted to do, decides to just do VAC ministers entirely, and then what? Then there's no negotiating for anything. Then you kind of just you're in parliament, which is what you ran to be in, and then there we are. So it's critical that persons understand the power that they hold, and not just when it comes to throwing down government and messing up the majority, but also in terms of the questions you can ask, the pressure you can put. I think we did a great job of that in opposition, while still, of course, being politically mature enough to recognize when something was good for the country and that you just need to kind of do that. So I think that that's something that we try to explain to all candidates. At the end of the day, this is what you're running for. This is where the power lies. So it's for me. I would love for everyone to do a term in parliament before they become a minister. But that's how I can run my party, not necessarily how others want to run theirs.
Right. Back in the January elections, you passed on the offer of a Minister of Finance.
Well, we passed on it because at the time we had it. So a lot of people may not know, but in the early negotiations, we had Rami and Fine. Yes, we did, which was MP Weaver. Based of course on the fact that she has knowledge of the subject matter.
Oh, she was offered a Minister of Finance?
Yes. So that was what was offered. Ultimately, she chose to stay in Parliament, which of course you cannot force anyone to be a minister. So it's always an offer, and if that is the decision, then that's the decision. And then ultimately, because we did not feel we had sufficient time to field a more suitable candidate, we said, okay, we will let this ministry go. And then it ended up going to the Democratic Party, which I think Minister Marinka Gumbs has been doing. Sorry, the personal relationship has to be put aside. But I think Minister Marinka Gumbs has been doing a fantastic job, been very frank, very straightforward with people and with Parliament. It's definitely worked out, I think, for the benefit of the country, that you have someone there that again has knowledge of the subject matter as well. So that's important. But ultimately, yes, we did have it. And again, you can't force anyone to be a minister. So ultimately, when MP Weaver said she's decided to stay in Parliament, I said, okay, that's fine. And then we moved on with that. And that is actually how we ended up with the ministry plenipotentiary, and then ended up sending Patrice to the Netherlands. And of course, when government fell, the intention was to put forward another candidate for Vrami, which we were very well prepared to do. And then, government fell and we were told, well, you can't screen anybody new. So that is how we ended up having to recall Patrice, Minister Patrice Gumbs, and then put him in the role of Vrami, which she's been doing a fantastic job.
Speaking of the Honorable Minister of Finance handling the Enya situation, what is your take on that, when she says, I will make sure that the St. Martin policy holders get paid, and not any other country?
Yes. So I think that that's how we all would like it to be handled. You still, of course, have to keep consideration with the fact that, well, if you got your policy on St. Martin and you move to Bonaire to retire, you're still a St. Martin policy holder, essentially. So if it's that we're excluding persons who did not get their policy in St. Martin, 100%, and 100% I'm in agreement with her, but you have to also keep that consideration open, that maybe they got their policy here, but they decide, I'm going to retire somewhere else, and Bonaire happens to be that place, or Sabre or Statia, and you have to keep that possibility open.
All right. Let's talk about a letter you submitted to the Minister of Finance.
Yes.
Let's touch on that a bit.
Yeah. So it was actually two pieces of two draft legislation. So there was a draft legislation for the national ordinance, the accountability ordinance. So some changes to modernize it, basically. And I did say that after election, when the dust settled, I would publish the summary on what those changes are. So good that you asked, because then I can remember to do that later today or this week. But essentially, it will modernize the ordinance and allow the execution of a national decree that would then regulate tendering, because that's what the law calls for now. Former MP Peterson spoke about it quite often over the 4 years in Parliament, because what you saw with, for example, the waste management contracts, with the district cleaning tendering, it kind of goes based on whatever the feeling is at that moment. There is no streamlined process for tendering within government. And at the time, the former minister of RAMI tried to put in place a tender policy for RAMI, but that also is not, it's essentially an illegal policy, because you cannot have each ministry with their own tender policy, because it's public funds. It's not VRAMI's money, it's government's money that essentially is being spent. It's not education's money, it's government's money. So to have that national decree that then streamlines that process, it's going to go a long way, I think, to closing some of the uncertainties and the gaps in our tendering that we've been doing so far, to make sure that your money is spent, our money, Grace, is spent properly.
I'm listening. Yeah. Okay, so that's on the tendering of waste management.
Yes. Of tendering in general.
In general.
Yeah. So it's anything. So it's whether it's waste management, it's if you need something for the schools, if you need something for tourism, etc. It regulates tendering for the whole of government, because it's public money that you're spending.
Right. And speaking of spending public money, government basically squandered thousands of dollars on heavy equipment in the Vromi. So I don't know if you want to touch on that, but
the landfill equipment.
Because the landfill equipment.
Yeah. So the landfill equipment, it's very funny, but I think actually the Minister Gumbs is going to address this this week. At least he mentioned to me he would address it in press briefing this week. So how it happens is, what I was made to understand and what I recall, the equipment was provided, yes, and NRPB had the maintenance responsibility, but that responsibility expired last year, June. No SLA was signed with a company to continue the maintenance. So ultimately, now we've rolled into a new year, we've rolled into a new government. And you see again an example of where things where the ball was dropped previously, because as soon as that NRPB responsibility was ending, something should have been in place to be the catch net, to renew and to have a company already set up and sorted to do the maintenance. So yeah, a year of no maintenance in these conditions, the heat, the work on the dump, you're frequently, doing what you got to do. So it's wear and tear that needs a structured service level agreement, that there's maintenance happening, maybe every quarter or something like that. But I know that that's being worked on now, of course, and hopefully they get it done sooner rather than later, and they can move forward with that.
Right.
Yeah.
You moving out of the as a member of parliament, becoming a minister, and taking up your seat as former MP Rayon Peterson.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You pushed for this, of course. I mean,
No, I mean, it was just the like I said, it's looking at the fact that the ministry needs a manager. I think that my experience in private sector, my passion for education as well, especially when it comes to not just special needs but literacy, the literacy rates on the island, and not just I'm talking about reading and such. I'm also talking about math literacy. If you look at recent results from around the Caribbean in CXC, math literacy has actually plummeted on every island, and literacy in general is struggling. So those things, of course, is what put me forward. Of course, knowing that MP Peterson would be the one to take my place. But ultimately, if we had gone in a different direction, that would have been fine too, to remain in Parliament. So Rayon will be coming back into Parliament, and I think it will be interesting to see that dynamic as well with the new members that are coming in, not just from the other parties. It's a very young Parliament again. If you look at not just us but other parties as well. So it will be interesting to see how the veteran, so to speak, of which with 4 years under his belt, he is technically a veteran right now in this very young Parliament, how that is going to move forward. So,
what will it take to keep this government together for the next 4 years?
I think it just depends on everyone, on open communication within the coalition, and
no hidden agendas.
No hidden agendas. No hidden agendas. A relaxed and mature opposition as well. That does not just spend time trying to identify what they perceive as a weakest link. And of course it is now a coalition of 9. So that is a little bit of comfort as well. So yeah, I think it really is just about open communication and making sure that whatever ends up in the government program, that is worked on to be executed, and not just communication with each other, communication with the public and with Parliament on a whole.
Right.
So that also is very critical to keep things together.
What can we look forward or expect from the PFP party in the near future? Of course, I mean, you've just this is basically your second term in Parliament.
Yeah, well, technically third term if we're looking at the legal definition of term.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, term.
If we're looking at the legal definition of term, yeah, third. Well,
I
no.
forgot to include January. Sorry, my bad.
Definitely looking forward to continuing to focus on what we have. I think from a different angle as well now with the Ministry of ECYS. Executing as much as possible what is in our manifesto when it comes to the two ministries that we hold, but also in Parliament. I know that MP Peterson has talked about the very same screening law, this tendering law, this national ordinance as well is something that was a passion project of his as well. So to keep an eye out on what is coming from government perspective and what you can expect in Parliament. So you have that higher education ordinance that's coming. You have other things that are coming, the general health insurance. So yeah, keeping an eye on these things and making sure that they are as much as possible in the best interest of everybody on some matters.
All right.
Yeah.
In
closing, Grace, thank you for having me. It's been great to be back in the Breakfast Lounge. On my way to Parliament now for the credentials, and this Friday we have the swearing in, of course, of the members of Parliament. And then Thursday is the closing of that term, so that we can say farewell to some. Some will not be returning. And yeah, to just let everyone to stay tuned, because we will continue, of course, to update not just our YouTube, but our community chat on WhatsApp has worked out quite well. So that'll be kicking as well.
So we'll be continuing.
We'll be continuing with that. Just to give updates on the movements in Parliament, movements in executive, and just keeping persons up to date in general. And also just a note, it is still hurricane season. Please keep an eye out. Tropical Storm Gordon looks like it's gonna, pass us a little northward turn. We're hoping, but we're not out of the woods yet. So stay vigilant and stay prepared.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Leader of the Party for Progress, soon to be Minister of the CYS, if she passes that.